Hi, my name's Rebecca, and I am usually a German-speaking YouTuber, so if you speak German, check out my main channel. But my mom asked me to redo my latest video, and here's to you, Mom. We're going to talk about the coronavirus in English. I asked my subscribers on the other channel about the questions that they had, and I thought there were very good questions and very important questions to answer. If you're looking for a specific question, check out the description box. I put all of the timestamps there. I also put all of my sources into the description box and match them with the timestamps. If I don't explicitly mention a source or don't write one down there, that means that I took it from the World Health Organization or the Robert Koch Institute here in Germany, and that's basically the public health institute in Germany, and they're doing a wonderful job on getting together all the information, so I use those two mainly as sources. But before we get into all of the juicy questions, I would like to have a basis. We need to be able to use the same words correctly, which is why I'm going to talk about some basics. And the first basic is, of course, what is a virus? And a virus is something very special because it's not like you or me. It's not a living thing like a bacteria or a cell. A virus cannot replicate on its own. That means a virus cannot make its own copies and therefore cannot spread on its own. In order to do that, a virus will basically break into a host cell and replicate there. So it will use the resources of a host cell to replicate, to make copies. And once it has made enough copies, the cell will burst and the virus is set free. And then the virus, of course, tries to spread. Bursting does not sound very good, and you're right, it's lethal. So the host cell then dies in this process. So when we're infected with a virus, we have two different kinds of virus in our body, basically. One is roaming free, trying to find a host cell or trying to spread outside of the body. And the other kind is actually already in a host cell in one of our cells, has infected our cells. And the disease that actually comes from a virus is therefore not necessarily the virus itself, but our immune response to the infection of the virus. Because our immune system, of course, is looking for the free virus as well as infected cells in our body and trying to kill those, trying to find those. And of course, we have dying cells because of the virus. So that is what actually causes a disease. Most of the viruses in this world are not made to infect us, are not made to kill other beings. Viruses are actually really good. There are a lot of viruses that we need in our body, and we have tons of them in us all the time that are not making us sick, but helping us digest, for example. Now we have coronavirus going around, but it's actually not the coronavirus. Coronavirus is basically just a family of viruses. The same way we have families and types of animals, so we have different birds, we have wildcats, we have different types of viruses. And coronavirus is one family or one type of virus that exists out there. And this one is only one specific type of that coronavirus family. So the specific virus we're having issues with is the SARS-CoV-2 virus, or SARS-CoV-2, and SARS actually stands for severe acute respiratory syndrome. And that, of course, indicates the type of issues we have when we're infected with the virus. We've probably all heard that coughing has something to do with, pneumonia has something to do with this, and that's because the virus attacks our respiratory system inside of us. However, like I said, just being infected with the virus does not mean that you're actually sick. The disease that comes with it is what we call the coronavirus disease 2019, which is why some people say COVID-19 all the time. It's basically the same as HIV and AIDS. You can be infected with HIV but not be sick from the virus and then get AIDS, which is the disease that is caused by HIV. So there's always a difference between the two. One of the ways a virus can spread is a so-called droplet infection. And in this case, that means because this virus lives in the respiratory system and in our throat, while we're actually coughing or sneezing or actually even talking, we're spreading little tiny droplets that we can't see into our environment. These droplets then can either stay in the air, be airborne, but we're not sure that the coronavirus can do this, and there's indication that it can't do that, but these droplets can hit another person. So when you're too close to another person and talking to another person, you're spreading droplets from your throat to this person. And if you potentially have the coronavirus and potentially have that infection, you are spreading this droplet with the virus to the other person. That's also why it's very important to sneeze and cough into your elbow, not into your hands, so you're not touching other surfaces, or even better into a tissue if you have one available. The other thing is really important to keep a distance to other people, because these droplets, like I said, even when we're speaking, I am spewing droplets as I sit right here. So it's very important to keep a distance to people. And I don't think most of us could cough beyond 2 meters. I don't know what's that in feet. If you know, let me know in the comments. But keep a good distance to other people. The other type of infection that there is a so-called smear infection, and this means that if virus particles are on any kinds of surfaces that we might touch them, then touch our face, touch our mouth, touch our food, whatsoever, and bring the virus into the body that way. We could trace back most of the coronavirus cases to a person-to-person, so most likely a droplet infection. So we don't really know if a smear infection touching things can actually infect us, but we can't exclude that option. So we have no proof that that is the way people are infecting each other, but we also have to see that as a possibility. So if you actually did get some disinfection wipes or some kind of disinfection cleaning supplies, then make sure that you're cleaning your surfaces, most importantly, door handles, your phone, your keys, so things that you're using every single day, and all the other surfaces, it will be enough if you just keep them clean them regularly, and make sure that you're wiping everything off. You will be able to remove the virus from your hands just by washing your hands. You have to wash them for a while though, for 20 to 30 seconds. If you can't remember that, or if you don't want to count, then just sing happy birthday to Oprah in your head twice, and that's pretty much 20 seconds. So just use that and you will be able to get rid of the virus from your hands. There's no need to buy tons of hand disinfection and take that hand disinfection away from hospitals, because they are the ones who definitely need that more than us. A really good question I got was then how long the virus can actually live on surfaces. And this question, we kind of have to look at it a little more differentiated, because a virus can live very long on a surface, or live as far as it can live. The question is, how long is a virus infectious? How long can it be infectious when it is on a surface? And there were some studies that have been conducted now, but we kind of have to take them cautiously. This is not a rule of thumb, but they found that a virus could stay infectious, or this coronavirus disease, for 13 hours on steel and for 16 hours on plastic. So not a super long time, but the other coronavirus that was in 2003, so the SARS epidemic, the SARS-CoV-1, at this point, that one could live quite long on surfaces. We know that that lived up to several days, and that might still be a possibility. So do make sure you're disinfecting anything you use regularly, but you don't have to overdo it. As I said, most infections are found to be because of person-to-person contact, so because of a droplet infection. So this is the less important part, and if you didn't get any disinfection stuff, then don't worry about it. You're fine. Just clean your surfaces and wash your hands regularly. The next very important question is, what does this disease look like when we have gotten the virus and we actually have COVID-19? What does that look like? And I have to say at this point, biology is very, very variable. So every single person has a different immune system and will have different reactions to this disease. But we could say that the most important symptoms are a cough and a high fever. So those are the two things you should be looking out for, especially if you see other people on the street. Just avoid people that are coughing, and if you are sick, please stay home. But there are some things we can learn from the statistics out there, so we can have a look at the numbers. Right now, I'm taking the numbers from the World Health Organization. These are basically the numbers we got from China, where the outbreak was the worst at this point, although Europe might look a little worse right now. So 80% of the cases are mild to moderate, but this is a very broad definition. Mild to moderate also includes a pneumonia, so it's still pretty serious what we're talking about here. However, people in this category had an arterial oxygen saturation of 93% or more. That basically means that's the oxygen level in our blood, and we need 93% or more in order to make sure that all of our organs are getting enough oxygen. So mild to moderate here was defined as probably not hospital bound, or people who don't need to go to a hospital because it is that severe. So 80% were mild, and the next category is, of course, the severe cases, and that was 14%. I'd assume that severe is with an oxygen saturation of less than 93%. So we're going into a category where people definitely need some intensive care. They need to go into hospitals, and they definitely have to have some kind of treatment. And beyond that, we have 6% that are critical or even deadly. So 6% definitely need to go into the ICU, and we're probably giving these people oxygen. We're intubating them, and we're making sure that these people are getting enough oxygen into their system. A lot of people died for example, with organ failure, meaning that they didn't get enough oxygen to their different organs because their lungs and their respiratory system was slowly failing. And for these, it's really, really important that we have enough hospital beds and enough ICU beds. We won't know the numbers exactly until this whole pandemic is over, so these are only the numbers that we can work with right now. But even thinking about the fact that 20% of people that have this infection might have to go into the hospital is a very, very big number, and we have to keep this in mind. Even if 50% of our population is infected, if 20% of that 50% are going into the hospital, those are a lot of people, and we have to make sure that those beds are clear and ready for those people, and we have enough resources to take care of the critical cases or the severe cases. So a very good question that I also got was, why is this so different? Why are the symptoms so different? How can some people be asymptomatic and other people be dying from this disease? And basically that has to do with the group that we're going to look at. And there are groups that are at higher risk and groups that are at lower risk. Generally, we can say that kids are not super affected by this disease, and we'll talk about that later. And generally, younger people are not as affected if they contract the virus, and they sometimes don't even get the disease. They're asymptomatic. However, if you look into some groups, those groups are going to be, well, the severe and the critical cases, and they're high-risk groups. That is people starting at the age of 50 years old. Now I have to look at this. We have smokers and people that have certain preconditions. So preconditions of the heart, the lung, people that have some chronic disease of the liver or diabetes, that have cancer, or that generally have a weakened immune system due to several different reasons. And these are the groups that have the potentially very severe cases, that have the potentially very critical cases, and that's why we have such a broad band of different symptoms. That's why some people are asymptomatic with this and some people can actually die. That's just because of the different types of immune systems and preconditions we bring when we get this virus. So now we're starting to go into the question territory, and another next very good question was if the coronavirus always comes together with the flu, or if people that have the flu automatically have coronavirus. So since we now know that this is not the coronavirus, that it's a family, and this coronavirus most likely originates sometime at the end of 2019, the people that had the flu before 2019 most likely did not have coronavirus. However, what can happen now is that you have like mixed patients, because if you contract just a cold or the normal flu, your immune system is already very weak. So the likelihood of you actually also getting the coronavirus is a bit higher, especially if you're in one of the risk groups. And that's of course not a really good thing, because we don't want to have the flu and coronavirus and all these other things, because that's not very good for your system. But that's a possibility now that everything is happening at the same time. Another very good question was whether cats, and I also took dogs into the equation, can contract the virus, and is it dangerous for them? And we have no scientific proof. I looked at this, that it was dangerous for cats or dogs, or that they could actually be infected by the virus. There were some scientists that could find this new coronavirus on the snouts of dogs. But for all the dog owners out there, we know when we're taking a walk, our dog is sniffing around everywhere, which means they just literally might have the virus on their snout, but that doesn't mean they're infected with the virus. So I wouldn't be too worried about your cats or dogs. If you are going outside with your dog and we could show that the virus can at least live on the snout of a dog, please just be wary of what your dog is sniffing. I think it'll be fine if a dog is sniffing a tree, because potentially there's no virus there. But if your dog is sniffing, for example, a park bench and where people were sitting or people were eating, then just maybe pull the dog back and direct them towards some grass, just to be sure. And if you're very, very sick, and if you're coughing, if you're sneezing and all that stuff, just keep your dogs and pets at a distance to make sure that they're just not getting anything or carrying anything, potentially infecting other people. There has been no proof, like I said, but it's always good to be on the careful side. The next question or rumor I have heard is that the virus escaped a lab, either because it was supposed to be a bioweapon or to kill old people or whatever. And there has been no proof about this scenario. I linked an article below, so you can't prove it. And if you look at the genetics of this virus, it is most likely from bats, because it has a very high amount of same DNA as bat's virus or bat coronaviruses have. So it most likely did originate in an animal and mutate, and then jumped from like the animal to the person. And speaking from lab experience, it's actually not that easy to create a new virus like this. Methodically, it's easy to mutate a virus, but it's still not very easy to specifically mutate a virus. And you also don't really know what mutations will contract or what they will actually then do. You can mutate a virus, but you have no idea if that will actually go to a human, if it will actually infect a human or an animal, or what regions it will infect. That's really difficult to find out, and if someone really tried to do that, they would have done that for a while. They would have done it over several years. So at least the colleagues would have noticed that that person's doing something suspicious, and I would hope that they would stop them. And if it just escaped a lab, labs that handle viruses have very, very strict lab conditions, and I don't really see how a virus could come out, because it's also not that easy to just like toss virus in the environment. Because jumping from a model organism, so like actually jumping from a petri dish to a human or to an animal, is a very big thing, because usually things that grow in petri dishes are not very good at surviving outside in the wild. So from my personal lab experience, I also don't think that that is very likely, and there's no evidence to be found for this scenario. So I think that's just a rumor. Then there's this thing going around about coronavirus and ibuprofen, that you might contract more coronavirus if you take ibuprofen, and that's not true. This was based on some kind of study from the University of Vienna, but they have since then said that is fake news, that is not true. And the WHO today, now on the 19th of March, said that there is no reason to believe that ibuprofen has any negative effects if you have contracted this new coronavirus, so you should be able to take it. But nonetheless, if you're not feeling good and there is a reason to believe that you have contracted the new coronavirus, please get tested and talk to your doctor no matter what. Please do not self-medicate, and make sure that you know what you're having so you can self-quarantine correctly and you can receive treatment if needed. So no matter what, please consult your doctor. The next very good question was, how long do we actually carry this virus in us? How long are we actually infectious to other people? And why is the quarantine 14 days? And this is one of those questions where we also will know the answers once this whole thing is over. So now we can only look at some tests, we can look at the numbers, and we can do some studies. And one study that was conducted showed that after showing symptoms, so after the symptoms had started, you are infectious to other people up to 10 days. And now infectious means two things. Number one, you have to have a high enough concentration of virus in your body, or actually virus in your throat. That's the first condition of being infectious. And the second is that you need to give those viruses a vehicle to leave your body. We talked about droplet infections before, so speaking alone is already a vehicle enough, but especially when you show symptoms, so especially when you're coughing, you are bringing those viruses into your environment. So of course that is the time when you are extremely infectious, and that's the time when you'll have the highest concentration of virus in your throat. However, it can be that, for example, you don't get the disease, but the virus is replicating a lot in your respiratory system, but your immune system just holds it back, but the concentration is still high enough to spread all those viruses around you. So even asymptomatic people can be infectious, although symptomatic people are more infectious because they obviously are showing symptoms like coughing, where they bring more of the virus into the environment. Another study, or at least the numbers when you look at them in China and compare them to the numbers that we have here, scientists have found that the average time from meeting a person with the coronavirus and getting infected by that person and showing symptoms is 5 days. However, the span of these days is super wide. So people are also showing symptoms after 11 days of contact that they had to the other person that was infected. So it can take up to 11 days for symptoms to show. And that's why quarantine is 14 days, because at that point, either the person didn't get it and we know that they don't have it, the person will have showed symptoms and we know that they're sick and we can quarantine them further, or the immune system will have somehow gotten over the virus and lowered the virus concentration in the throat to a point where you are not infectious anymore. And that's why quarantine 14 days is actually pretty good. We probably won't get everyone. It seems to have a really wide span of days, but most of the people we will get if we keep them quarantined for 14 days. And that's why if you're sick, it's really important to stay home for a long time and to make sure not to go outside and have contact with other people. Another good question that I got was whether people who had died from COVID-19, so if bodies, corpses, could still infect morticians. And I couldn't find any numbers or statistics on how long a virus can stay active in a dead body or how long this specific virus can stay active in a corpse. But I would assume that it's not very long because, as I said, they need host cells to live and they don't really live. Yeah, but if we assume that a person has died and they still have a high enough virus concentration, they can definitely be still infectious to other people. However, since a dead person cannot cough or talk, we're not necessarily giving those viruses the vehicle to leave the body. So probably they will still be infectious for a while. I don't know how long, but I would think that morticians are taking the necessary precautions. So they're probably wearing gloves and masks and making sure that they're protected and potentially not infected. That's also the reason why a lot of funerals in Italy can't be, well, the family can't be there, and my heart goes out to everyone who can't have that, because I would think it's a horrible thing to not be able to be there for the funeral of your father, mother, or grandparent. That must be a horrible thing. So I hope it doesn't get to that point, and we want to make sure that we're not getting to that point. But on principle, yes, a dead body can be infectious to other people, but I think if you're taking the necessary precautions, that risk is very low in compared to a sick person. The next rumor I got was if when it's warmer, the virus will disappear, and that is a possible scenario, but not a very likely scenario. So for one, we know that the virus can spread even in warm and in humid environments, so the environment itself is not going to change the trajectory of the virus or the infectiousness of the virus. However, our immune system is always a little weaker in the winter because of different vitamin D levels, because of different melanin levels, and these different hormone levels can affect how effective our immune system is. So it could be that our immune system all does improve when it gets warmer, but the warm weather itself is not going to do anything for us. Then that's why I think this scenario is not very likely. I really do think that it's mostly our behavior that is going to help this virus stop or at least slow down. Because the one other factor in warmer weather or colder weather is that in cold weather, we usually spend more time indoors. And when we spend time indoors with other people where there's no fresh air, there's no air circulation, of course, we have an increased risk of infecting other people with things. So it's possible, but not very likely. So I would really not rely on that. It's really what you're doing that is going to make the difference. So the next question is, why are children not being infected by this virus, or why are they not dying from COVID-19? And this is actually a really interesting question. So at the beginning, we thought that kids could actually not contract the virus because there were basically no kids that got sick, but now we have found out that kids actually can be infected by the virus. They actually have high enough concentrations in their throat, in their body, to spread the virus around them. However, they do not contract the disease as easily. So they may be infected, but their immune system is obviously in some way better than our older people's immune system, and are therefore not getting sick as much. And there are a few theories that I'm going to try to explain, but there's an article linked below that you can check out if you want to read more on this. So the first basic one is that there's this thing called cell senescence, and if you think, senescence sound kind of like senile, then yes, you're right. Basically, our cells also become senile, and that means that they're less effective over time, that they might die more quickly or might not spread as quickly, and so on. So an immune system of an 80-year-old is definitely a lot different than an immune system of a 2-year-old due to the fact that her cells are senile. Then there's also this theory that over time, grown-ups' lungs become less sensitive to their environment. Because we live in times where there's a lot of pollution, there's a lot of pollen outside, there's a lot of all kinds of different pollution, our lungs basically learn to become less sensitive. So we have less immune reactions all the time, so we're not overreacting and getting allergies, for example. And a child's immune system will not have learned that yet, or a child's lung might not have learned that yet, and therefore might be more sensitive to any kinds of pollutants, viruses, or anything coming into the body. This other theory is very more specific, and it's a bit complicated, and this is where we're getting into biology as a typical subject. The virus actually enters the host cell in our bodies via a receptor that is called ACE2. And now kids have more of this receptor. So we would think, well, if kids have more of this receptor, then obviously they must be contracting the virus more easily, or the virus can enter the cells more easily. That would be correct logic. However, we are in biology, and biology is a science of likelihoods and of balances. This ACE2 receptor is also very important for the immune system. And it seems that if we have more of this receptor, it can have a better immune response. Whereas if we have less of this ACE2 receptor, which older people do, they have less of this receptor, their immune response evidently is more muted. And even though they have less receptor and theoretically less virus can get into the cells, that missing immune response is obviously more important. So the immune response part is more important than the virus entry part. I know that may not sound logical, but like I said, this is biology. Our bodies are all very different, and it's a very fine-tuned system of different balances and scales. And if one of them is tipped off, then the whole system collides. And that is the reason why it takes so long for scientists to figure stuff out. So give us a break. We're doing our best. The other very good question is, can this virus mutate? And the easy answer is yes, this virus can mutate. You and I mutate. Every cell mutates. Our immune system takes care of most of the mutations that we get, otherwise we get sick. This virus can mutate as well. Now, this is my opinion, or this is a prediction on my part, but if you look at evolution, a virus is most effective when it can spread widely. So a virus is not necessarily a good virus if it kills its host fast, because if it kills its host fast, then that means it can't reproduce as much as it could in a healthy host. So the most important factor is for a virus to spread. So if this virus mutates, I would think it would mutate in a direction where it's more spreadable, and that means less lethal. Because this specific virus is in our respiratory syndrome, it is so problematic because it can go so far down in our respiratory syndrome and cause pneumonia and contract diseases of the lung. But if this virus mutated so that it infected cells in the throat or in the mouth area, it would be a lot easier for this virus to spread. But that would also mean that this virus is a lot less lethal for us. So I personally think that if this virus mutated, it would mutate in a way that would make it less lethal, but more spreadable. So hopefully that can help you sleep at night. Now we're coming to more of the questions that have to do with protection or the epidemiological part of this whole thing, and I will try to answer your questions at best. So the first question is whether disinfection substances or hand disinfection actually helps, and the answer is yes. Although there are different kinds of disinfection, I would now say the stuff that you can buy in the States is usually disinfectant also to viruses, because people in the States are always more scared of the flu than people in Europe are. But you should check the label, whether it can kill viruses or kill certain types of viruses, and then it is definitely effective. If that does not explicitly say on the label, if it just explicitly says bacteria, it might not be able to help you. But like I said, disinfecting your hands is not necessarily the most important thing unless you really have to spend the whole day outside and you have to be in an office or whatever, because Merkel so wonderfully said that 70% of our population needs to be infected before this virus can stop. Of course, people ask me if 60 to 70% of the population would have to be really infected for this virus to stop. And this question is kind of difficult to answer. There are epidemiologists that have different models for how this thing could go, but we won't know until it's actually happened. So the more positive models are 30 to 50% of the population, and the less positive, more negative models are 50 to 70% of the population need to be infected in order for this thing to dim down, because we don't have a vaccine and we don't have a medication that is specific and good against this one coronavirus. And that's why we have to get our immunity from actually being sick and carrying the antibodies and the cells that can kill this virus quickly. So like I said, we won't know it until this whole thing is done, but I believe it is always better to work with the worst case scenario to make sure that worst case will not happen. If we keep thinking it's going to be 70% of the population, then hopefully that will make people stay at home and not leave their house. And then, of course, we have a chance of it not being 70%, and especially a chance of it not being as lethal. So the next question was, if so many people have to be infected by this virus, why not just let everyone get infected, get their immunity? Why do we have to stay home 2 to 3 weeks? And wouldn't it make more sense to just let everyone get infected now and get this whole thing over with? No, that is not a good thing. We talked about the fact that 20% of the cases are severe, critical, or even deadly. And that means that, like I said, if 50% of the population gets infected and 20% of those have to go to hospitals, our hospital systems are not made to have that many people hospitalized. We do not have enough ICU beds, we do not have enough oxygen for these people, and we certainly don't have enough material to give everyone what they need and give them the correct treatment. So the thing about this 2 to 3 week isolation is more about flattening the curve. I'm sure some of you have seen this, but it's very important, which is why I'm going to show you again. If we all get infected at the same time, we are definitely going to overwhelm the healthcare systems, and there will be a lot of unnecessary deaths. So there will be a lot of deaths because we just don't have enough material and enough resource to take care of people. In Italy, there are literally not enough ventilators to take care of all of the patients that actually need them, and that is the reason why a lot of people are unnecessarily dying. We could save a lot of these people if we could get ventilators to them, but we just don't have enough. And that is why we need to stay home and make sure that the infections come over time. So the critical cases have more time, that we have them spread over time, so the hospitals can work at a capacity they can actually work with, so ventilators are there for people when they then actually need them, and then at the very end, most of us will have an immunity, and hopefully the curve will go down. So it's really, really just about making sure that we have enough resources and enough hospital beds for the people that will get the severe, critical, or deadly cases. I'm going to show another graph. This is from the 16th of March. I know it's the 19th of March today, but I couldn't find a nice graph like this that is updated. And we can see that a lot of countries are still in that high trajectory area. South Korea, Japan, and Singapore were able to flatten their curves, which is mostly because they took really, really strict measures and made sure that their population stayed at home, made sure that the people stayed at home, did not go outside, and did not contract the virus. Some countries are starting to show an effect. I will link a New York Times article below that is from today, where they started talking about who kind of did what and what effect that had. But the fact is, we need to stay home, we need to flatten this curve, we need to make sure that this virus is not going to keep spreading exponentially, but flatten that curve of infections. Another good question was whether when these 2 to 3 weeks are over, if the pandemic will not just come back the same way. Won't we just have the same trajectory after the 2 to 3 weeks? And my answer is yes and no. So like I said, we're not doing this to make sure that there are less infections. Of course, we're hoping that there will be less infections, but we're really just trying to spread all of the infections that we will have over time. So what I think the governments will do is, in 2 to 3 weeks, they won't say, wow, let's open all the restaurants again, let's bring back all the games, let's bring back all the stuff. at one time, but I think they will slowly start bringing back public life, slowly start bringing back schools, universities, and so on, and then sports events. So hopefully the rest infections that we still need will come at that time, but they won't come as strongly. So we'll still have the flattened curve. There probably will be a small uprise, but the thing is, like I said, we know that there will be infections. We're just making sure that they're all coming at a different time. So we'll probably slowly go back to normal life. The other thing is that people, for example, now I might be infected. I don't know. I might have this thing. I might not be showing symptoms yet, or my immune system might make sure that I don't get any symptoms. And the people that might be infected, we will definitely know at the end of these 2 to 3 weeks if they were infected and showing symptoms, if they were infected or not showing symptoms. So we basically take those out of that function, and they would have been spreading it easily in the next 2 to 3 weeks. So because we're taking most of the people out of that equation, we are flattening the curve, and we're making sure that less people are being infected. And the other thing, of course, is that people are hopefully now sensitive to the subject. So even after these 2 to 3 weeks are over, after this month is over, I hope people will still have high hygienic standards, will be washing their hands regularly, will be making sure that they're kind of social distancing, that they're not throwing major parties with all kinds of people. So I hope people will be sensitive to this subject, because like I said, this is not for us young people. If you are a young person watching this, this is not for you. This is for your grandma. This is for your grandpa, your mom, your dad. This is for the people in your life that are over 50 to 60 years old. This is for the people in your life that have diabetes. These are people that have normal lives, normal, healthy lives. But because they have an autoimmune disease or anything else, this virus might kill them. And we are doing this for them. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for my mom. I'm doing this for my grandpa. I'm doing this for my dad and anyone else's father and mother. So please stay at home and make sure that you're taking care of the people around you. The next bigger question was now, will we have enough toilet paper? And like I said, most of my followers are in Germany. And for the Germans out there, I can tell you, we will have enough toilet paper. It's all good. We will have enough food for everyone. And that specifically is taken care of. The government will make sure that that is taken care of. So now there are a few questions that are more my opinions. People wanted to know my opinions on some things. And the first question is, of course, how long do I think that this whole thing will take? How long will this whole thing be? And I think it's going to take a long time for this to completely die down. I think we're talking about months more than we're talking about weeks. Because, as I said, we have to slowly start bringing public life back, and we can't just from one day to the other open all restaurants, all cafes, all schools at the same time, because that obviously would be counterproductive. So I do think this is going to take quite some time for everything to return back to normal. There was this other thing about 2 years with us because the Robert Koch Institute in Germany at least said this would take 2 years to get under control, and people asked me, will this really take 2 years? But I need to say those 2 years were meant for really erasing this coronavirus and not 2 years for public life being the way it is right now. So I do not think that we will be all self-isolated, socially distanced for 2 years. But I think 2 years is realistic to say that this virus will be completely gone, because it's going to take a long time for vaccines actually to be approved. I know we have studies right now, but it takes a long time for them to be approved, and then for them to be approved worldwide, because every continent has different standards, so they're going to do different things. So some European countries have now not allowed to go outside, so you're forbidden to leave your house unless you are going shopping for groceries, obviously, unless you're going to work or are taking care of a relative. And people asked me if it was realistic and if I thought that was a good idea. I think it is realistic and a good idea if people do not start adhering to these rules. So if people keep going outside, keep going in cafes, keep picnicking somewhere, then yes, I think it's a necessary thing to do, and I think it's a good thing to do, because that is the only way we are going to stop this virus. So please stay at home. And the next question was, of course, will you stay at home? The answer to that is yes, I'm staying at home. I'm staying home. I am in between a move. I really can't get sick. I don't want to get sick for anyone else. I want to make sure that I'm not spreading this. I do take small walks, but I take them in the morning where no one is outside, and I make sure that I have enough distance from people around me. I don't stop anywhere, sit down or something. I really just take my walk and then do my thing the rest of the day. And if I want to do sports, I do home trainings. I will figure it out. I'm good at being at home, and I think you can do that too. So I hope this video was in some way informative. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. If anything is not correct in this video, every day we have new information and we're finding out new things about this virus. So if there's anything in here that wasn't correct anymore, or wasn't correct, then let me know also in the comments. But please do name your source. That's really important to me, that we are all going to good sources. But yes, I think it's really important that we're all educated. And yes, I hope you like this video, and maybe we'll see each other soon. I don't know. This is now a second channel officially, so we'll see what comes on this. And see you then.